Welcome to the January-February edition of Gameplay Learn, the educational games news podcast. I'm your host, Anwar Andres Lequerica. This month, we have many stories. Like, for example, there's the expansion of iCivics. There's also a new serious game to help overcome cognitive bias. There's a game that teaches yoga to individuals with blindness. There's virtual reality hardware and software for education. There's an alternative reality history game that teaches Jewish life and New York City politics. We also talk about educational games events that have just passed and the ones that are coming up, like the Games for Change Festival this April. Our game of the month is the literary marvel Device 6. We end the podcast with the latest job postings in the field. Thanks for listening. And now for the latest news. There's a new card game called The Metagame, created by game designers Eric Zimmerman, Colleen Macklin, and John Sharp. The Metagame is a card game involving cultural debate, where players make claims about art, media, and cultural landmarks. For example, players will play cards against each other and debate whether the Big Mac is more influential than Marcel Duchamp fountain sculpture. The card game has been a big hit at gaming conferences and can be ordered online. iCivics is one of the most successful game-based curricula projects so far, and the MacArthur Foundation has recently funded its expansion. iCivics was started in 2010 by Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and is now used by 40,000 teachers and 6 million students, making it the most widely adopted civics curriculum in the country. In iCivics, students play short web-based games related to the branches of government, immigration, elections, and more. There are gamification elements like badges and leaderboards, plus lesson plans and other educator resources. Check out the new site at iCivics.org. The University of Oklahoma has designed a game that helps intelligence analysts overcome cognitive biases that cloud their judgment. The game is called Macbeth, which stands for Mitigating Analysts' Cognitive Bias by Eliminating Task Heuristics. Macbeth simulates a crime investigation, giving players a group of suspects and information to help them decide who committed the crime. The player guides agents as they collect information and then decides whether that information was affected by certain types of cognitive bias. For example, anchoring bias. Anchoring bias causes people to rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive. Macbeth has won a number of awards at the International Industry Training, Simulation, and Education Conference and has some research to back it up. A number of games have been released and others are in development that teach social and emotional skills, including empathy, self-control, listening, and meditation. One of these games is being developed by a team led by Trip Hawkins, a founder of Electronic Arts. Another set of games is being developed by the Games Learning Society team at the University of Wisconsin. Actually, the winner of last year's Games for Change Festival was a game called Quandary, and it deals with ethics and empathy. In the past few years, Molindustria have created a collection of weird and very enlightening games related to capitalism, politics, sex, war, and other subjects. Have you ever played that insane McDonald's game on the web? That's a Molindustria game. The head of Molindustria will be a speaker at this year's Games for Change Festival. Recently, Molindustria blogged about some of their favorite thought-provoking indie games released in the past year. It's a great list. One of the games uses Kinect to force players into contorting and literally bending backwards to conform to society's expectation of women. Another teleports you to a random location on Google Street View, and you have to figure out where exactly you are. There's a new game by Anna Anthropy, the creator of the transgender game Dysphoria, plus a game called Realistic Facebook Privacy Simulator. You can find the link to the Molindustria blog post containing their favorite indie games on our site. The use of games in the healthcare field is growing quickly, and there are a large number of projects taking place. In the UK, there's a board game that teaches about malnutrition and another board game that teaches how to prevent pressure ulcers. Both have been adopted by the UK's National Health Service. In Finland, games that use a brainwave scanning headset and other sensors have been developed to address ADHD and teach stress management techniques. In Sweden, the Xbox Kinect motion sensor is being used to measure in a very precise way a patient's range of movements after suffering a stroke. Researchers at Ohio State University have designed a Kinect-based game to teach stroke victims how to relearn movement. One of the big funders of health games in the US is the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. There's also 2 major conferences related to games for health, one in the US and one in Europe. The field of extra gaming uses games to get people to exercise more. A number of extra game products are on the market, including apps that gamify your workout by giving you points and goals. The Games for Entertainment and Learning group at Michigan State University is designing an extra game for astronauts involving cycling. There's also a Kinect-based game that teaches yoga to people with blindness. There are also extra gaming labs being set up in schools. The National Science Foundation has given a $1.2 million grant to Purdue University for a project that involves middle school students learning how to design and program extra games. Initial research on extra gaming suggests it can improve students' fitness and academic performance. To learn more about the school-based extra gaming labs, go to our website. Virtual reality hardware is rapidly advancing and many products are coming to market. There's hardware such as virtual reality headgear, eye tracking sensors, omnidirectional treadmills to simulate movement, along with haptic feedback, which helps you feel the virtual environment. All these virtual reality tools are being used or are being proposed to improve and expand experiences such as gaming and work. In gaming, a number of consumers and developers are using immersive virtual reality headgear along with an omnidirectional treadmill to play first-person shooters. There's also a virtual reality game being developed that teaches the brain how to overcome diplopia, which is double vision, and amblyopia, which is lazy eye. Virtual reality is also being proposed to improve office settings. Imagine sitting in your workstation or cubicle, surrounded by a forest or a beach or Paris. Virtual reality could also be used in education to help recreate what someone must physically do to perform a task. For example, a student training to be a mechanic or a surgeon would use realistic movements in a simulation rather than a keyboard and mouse. Taking an online class or visiting historical locations could also become more immersive. The National Science Foundation just awarded Villanova University $1.2 million to develop an immersive telepresence environment to be used for learning and research. If you want to learn more about these developments in virtual reality, visit our site. Alternative reality games, aka ARGs, are games that combine actual real-world locations with digital screens, such as the screen on your cell phone, to display digital artifacts or reveal the game's story when the player is at those locations. Google launched a massive multiplayer online ARG called Ingress 2 years ago with a science fiction narrative. In Ingress, players battle to capture real-world locations such as public art, landmarks, monuments, etc. A team from the University of Wisconsin-Madison has created an open-source platform to design ARGs called Eris. A recent educational ARG designed on the Eris platform is called Jewish Time Jump New York. Players of Jewish Time Jump New York have to travel around the actual city, visiting sites of historical importance in Jewish life and city politics. The University of Chicago Game Changer Group has also designed an ARG that even incorporates a board game to explore economic, environmental, and epidemiological issues in the city of Chicago. A number of academic journals have issued calls for educational games papers. The International Journal of Gaming and Computer-Mediated Simulations announced a call for papers for an issue dedicated to the topic of transmedia and games. One of the subtopics are transmedia and games related to education. It also announced a call for a special issue on epistemological games and request submissions related to teaching civics. A special issue of the Syllabus Journal invites proposals for syllabi essays and toolbox entries that focus on video games in any field. This year's Games for Change Festival is again in New York City and will be taking place in April instead of June. Games for Change is an enormous festival centered around serious games, and for the first time will be part of the Tribeca Film Festival. This year's speakers include Genova Chen, who created Journey and Flower, and Duke University behavioral economist Dan Ariely. In related news, the third annual Latin American Games for Change Festival took place a couple of weeks back at the University of Sao Paulo. A few other amazing events happening soon include the Digital Media and Learning Conference taking place this March in Boston, and 2 back-to-back digital learning conferences at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which are the Cyber Learning Research Summit and the Games Learning Society Conference. The first annual summit on badges for learning just concluded in Silicon Valley. Badges are starting to be used in many learning settings. For example, a kid who successfully completes an after-school robotics workshop at a museum will get a robotics badge added to his personal digital badges backpack. All the major players in the badges for learning field were in attendance, including the MacArthur Foundation, Mozilla, and the Hive Learning Network. Participants talked about how to move the movement forward and expand the use of badges for credentialing and promoting learning. Several important new initiatives were announced at the summit. For example, edX, the MOOC platform, will incorporate badges. Another important announcement is the expansion of the After School Badges initiative that MacArthur launched in Chicago with over 100 local partners and institutions. That initiative now expands to over 9 cities. For more information about the summit and to watch the recordings of all the sessions, visit our website. The Institute of Play launched a really useful educational games database called Playful Learning a little while back to help teachers find and incorporate educational games. The Playful Learning site describes and categorizes educational games in detail, for example, by age group, language, cost, common core standards that the games cover. The site also allows teachers to write reviews of the games and read lesson plans and guides on how to incorporate these educational games into the classroom. The Institute of Play has been holding workshops throughout the country to provide teachers training on game-based learning and also on how to use the Playful Learning site. There are a couple of workshops happening in the next couple of months. So if you're a teacher or know any teachers interested in educational games, you can attend sessions at South by Southwest EDU, the College of the Holy Cross, Ohio University, Clemson University, and at the Games Learning Society Conference at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. To find out the dates and more detailed information, either visit our site or visit the Playful Learning site. The Global Game Jam 2014 took place during the weekend of January 24th to 26th. There were game jams in 73 countries and over 485 locations. In these game jams, participants raced to create games within a day or two, usually working non-stop. One of the games we talked about last month in our Game of the Month segment, Lucas Pope's Republia Times, was actually created during the Ludum Dare Game Jam. A charity game jam was organized last November by One Game a Month and Games for Change. The Games for Diversity Game Jam 2014 is this March and will be held in the Netherlands, the US, and Canada. During the Games for Diversity Game Jam, participants will explore how feminine and LGBTQ perspectives can produce innovative gameplay. There's a couple of job postings this month. NYU's Education Technology Group is seeking an assistant professor in digital media design. NYU does a lot of serious games work. Scratch is seeking a couple of software engineers. Scratch is a popular tool to teach programming and game design. And the Rochester Institute of Technology is looking for a full-time tenure-track assistant professor in serious games. For more details on these job postings, go to our site. Now for our Game of the Month segment. There are a number of games released in the past year that have interesting narratives and might be great learning experiences. Doki Doki Universe is one, Gone Home is another. The Stanley Parable has also been getting a lot of attention. The game we chose this month as Game of the Month is actually Device 6. It's an amazing experience that combines a written novel with images, video and sound, and puzzles. The puzzles in Device 6 are challenging and rewarding to solve. The story is very interesting. You play a woman who has woken up in a strange castle and can't remember how she got there. The whole game takes about 10 hours to finish. Device 6 is available for iOS for $4. The game is a great way to get people to read a mystery novel, since even if you don't enjoy reading, the puzzles and the surreal aesthetics might turn your crank. Alright, we have reached the end of the January-February podcast. Visit our site, gameplaylearn.com, for all the links to the things we mentioned. And you can also leave us a comment on our website if you have any tips, news stories, games, events, and job postings you think we ought to cover in a future podcast. Thanks for listening. See you soon.